Welcome back to the Marvel Movie Minute, a daily podcast in which we explore the films of the Marvel Cinematic Universe 1 minute at a time. In this, our fourth season, we're looking at Kenneth Branagh's 2011 film, Thor. I'm Matthew Fox from theethicalpanda.com.
And I'm Andy Nelson from the Next Reel Film Podcast.
Today we're talking about minute 28, which begins with Laufey declaring war and ends with Thor and Odin arguing while Heimdall watches, and apparently doesn't cut his hands while catching a sword in midair. But we'll get into all of that. Joining us on the podcast today is our guest, Pete Wright. Pete, since you're actually the original person with Andy and I'm the guest, it feels kind of weird to talk about you as a guest, but I've got the power. So, as our guest, what do you love about Thor?
I didn't until this morning.
Okay.
That is my giant grand awakening about this movie, you guys. I was on a little bit earlier in the season. We talked about a funny thing happened on the way to Thor's hammer. And that was delightful because it didn't involve the actual movie. I've never been a big fan of this movie. And I haven't watched it since it came out, really, practically. Like, I probably watched it again when it dropped on home video, and then I haven't watched it. I sat down to watch it this morning, and I'm not going to lie to you, I had a blast watching this movie. I really enjoyed it. That was a major turn for me. One of the things I like so much about it is I can actually see the seeds of today's Thor in this Thor. And I feel like that I had always, my headcanon was that this movie, they didn't know who Thor was yet. And so, Hemsworth wasn't playing him right. They didn't quite get to the point that Taika Waititi's Thor got him to, or maybe Whedon's Thor sort of got him to. And I retract all of my previous, I retract most of my previous statements about it. There's just a lot of weight in this movie, and I really had a great time with it. And I think this minute gets into some of the family dynamic that I think makes this movie really fascinating. When you have such incredible performers as Sir Anthony Hopkins in here delivering the business to his son, I think that's a delight to watch.
I really appreciate you saying that, because I think I've talked before, I had a similar kind of like scales falling from the eyes moment. For me, it came after I watched Ragnarok for the first time, and then went back and watched this movie.
Right.
I think it's because of exactly what you're saying. Like, I feel like Taika Waititi taught me how to watch a Thor movie, and I was able to then kind of use that lens to go back and watch this movie and realize, before I wasn't allowing myself to get caught up in all the family stuff, because it's the Bifrost and the big monster and all just looks kind of goofy. But I think now that I have seen so much more of that world, I've seen this world get destroyed, I can just appreciate it and love it. And there's just so much to dig into. And this minute's going to have a whole lot of that. So let's go right into that right after this quick message.
We love delivering content to our listeners that is free of ads that you just don't want to hear. This is a fun show to produce, but it does take time and cost money. Can you support us and help us out by becoming a member for the season? Membership is just $5 per month, or you can get a discount if you join at the annual rate. Members get bonus content, early access to shows, access to the live streams, and more. You can learn more at TruStory.fm/Marvel Movie Minute.
Let me just start there, Pete. And Andy, what did you notice about this minute? What kind of jumped out at you?
Well, the first thing that I notice is that Sleipnir disappears.
Yes.
Where the hell does the horse go? And to that matter, where are all of their horses? Their horses were parked out in front. I don't know if you park a horse, but they were, maybe it's because you don't have, in the Old West, you got the little bar that they strap the reins around.
Tether a horse.
You don't
right.
have that here. And so I guess their horses just went back to the pastures.
There is actually, once you hit Heimdall, there is actually a separate mini Bifrost that goes straight to the stable.
Yeah.
And that's why it's the stable Frost.
Right.
Yeah. That's not written about in the Norse stuff.
We have been assuming this whole time that Loki, being devious and conniving the whole time, was whispering to that guard, go tell Odin what's happening. Maybe he just said, hey, look, my idiot brother doesn't know how to take care of animals. We're probably going to leave the horses. Do you mind going to get them afterwards?
That's
anything's
entirely possible. I love that.
Well, Loki is an interesting character to talk about here. I mean, we know he's so devious, but I think, again, you said it earlier, Matthew, that there is this new lens through which we are learning how to watch these movies. And perhaps Loki, the series, has taught me about how to watch for, Hiddleston's Loki tricks in these earlier movies. And I really, for example, enjoy in this movie a lot of the humanity that he plays on his face. That, yes, his big show is that he's the trickster god. But, we get a segment in here, or just a quick clip of this, where you can tell he's both so devious and also, oh my God, what is happening in front of me right now? Like, I stand before you in shame. And I know that's late in the minute. We can get back to that. But I think Tom Hiddleston's performance in this movie, which I had often relegated to B-class character in Marvel lore, is one of the most interesting things to watch in this minute.
Yeah. He has some great dialogue, but I think far and away, he's the character who says the most when he's not speaking. And this minute, we get a couple of great, just kind of breaths and facial expressions from him. But let's, of course, start where the minute starts, with basically kind of a declaration of war. And we talked a bit about this yesterday in terms of what's Laufey thinking. But Pete, I'm curious your thoughts on it, too, because Laufey has kind of come up to Odin and been saying, this is all your son's fault. We can't just go back to diplomacy. Does Laufey know that he's going to attack from the beginning, and he's just kind of using diplomacy to lull Odin into, not being ready for it? Or do you think that maybe there was something Odin could have said in this conversation that would have made Laufey not attack? What's kind of your take on what's going through his head?
Well, I think a little of one and a lot of the other. My read on it is that no, Laufey was not always going to attack, and that, two, there was nothing that Odin could have said at that point that would have brokered some sort of a peaceful negotiation. By then, the trigger event had happened, right, and there is no takebacks in this relationship. But I get a sense that they had come to a careful detente, and that was largely okay, and that Thor broke it. And if I'm misreading that, I mean, let me know. There are so many little signals in here that I feel like I might have missed. But to me, the battle is already waged.
Yeah, I mean, we certainly, discussed that yesterday with the fact that, I mean, here is Odin showing up and just saying, just forget it. They're boys. They're young. They're idiots. Just don't pay attention to what they did. We'll just call it good and go on our way.
It's just a frat house prank that they destroyed your home and...
Yeah, right. Not even mentioning that they've killed potentially hundreds of frost giants. They killed the Jotun beast. Yeah, Laufey's dearest pet. And they've destroyed the city, and now there's this giant chasm of the underground cave that goes from Utgard Hall all the way down to the Bifrost Junction. It's but it's okay. They're boys. Boys will be boys.
They will be boys. That is the truth. And so I think in that regard, and I think you see in this minute that Odin knows it. Odin knows there's nothing he could say. He went for the familial play, but he's exhausted, and he already knows how this is going to play out. And so,
Well, that's a good point, because as Laufey said, All Father, I can't remember what he said last minute, but you don't look so good, right? I mean, he's clearly seeming weaker and weaker. And I think that's nice how that really shows in this. And I feel like Laufey is reading this like, I potentially, this is going to be my moment. There are only 7 of them here, plus a horse, and, we can take them. And so I just have to keep bringing up the fact that there is a horse here.
But it's a disappearing horse, so don't worry about it.
I also think, and Andy, this is partially your fault, because you've turned me into a Laufey apologist.
I know.
I think there's something a little bit noble in the fact that he doesn't attack until Odin says, so be it.
Yeah.
It's that kind of it's not enough for him just to say, no, you've caused there to be a war, and there's going to be a war whether you like it or not. He sort of waits for Odin to kind of say, agreed, we have to go to war, and then he attacks. And it kind of fits my understanding of the Jotuns as they're being kind of, they're aggressive, they want to take everything over. Maybe, although maybe that's just the story Odin told us, but certainly that there is a little bit of some level of nobility there. Which I really like.
100%. Yes, this is a gentleman savage character, right?
Yeah.
This is a softened character, and that is part of the great exercise of contrast that we have. That he would have this sort of demeanor with Odin and look the way he does at the same time,
right.
And that's what makes him a compelling character, and the Frost Giant's a compelling, race.
And so much more interesting than I gave him credit for.
Yeah, he has more honor and nobility than Thor does.
Absolutely.
Thor is the one who's supposed to, and Laufey is showing it.
Yeah, Laufey, you wonder if Laufey could pick up the hammer.
Maybe.
Give him a shot.
I mean, that's the thing, is that we can probably go into this a lot more at a later point in the movie, probably when, Thor catches the hammer again. But to me, when Thor says, whoever so shall be worthy, maybe I'm too much of a postmodernist, but I don't believe that there can ever be a objective standard of what is worthy the hammer is going to judge by, and so it's whether it's Odin's judgment of it or the hammer's, but we're getting way ahead of ourselves now.
Well, yeah, I mean that's like the magical sorting hat that we determined that the Mjolnir is somehow possessing of, right? Some magical power that it can determine, oh, you know what, you're worthy, you can hold me. It's
right.
Well, and so much of this movie, when he is declared unworthy and loses the hammer, it seems like the rest of the movie's journey is about you're not worthy until you've been through grief or loss. And that should not probably be the single sort of measure of worthiness, although an important part of it.
Well, I think that it's, I don't know if I would say that's what it is. I think that it's definitely more of a self-sacrifice sort of thing, but.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I would say it's more, we've been talking about this, that the problem is that it's not that he has to go through grief or loss, it's that because he never has, and because there's never been any consequences for his actions, and nothing's ever gone wrong for him, he's developed this incredible arrogance and carelessness and just devil-may-care attitude, and that's what has to change.
Yeah.
Well, and that's exactly my point about Laufey. Laufey as the leader of the Frost Giants, is as honorable a guy in their place as Odin is in his own.
Right.
And so who's to say what worthiness means? Magical sorting hat. Poppycock.
So I understand it's my job to be the one to kind of keep us on track and on minute, which is funny because it's you two who told me that it's your job. And so I'm going to stop you all from the tangentness. Let's get back to the minute itself. So Laufey attacks, and Odin is clearly ready for this. And he puts down his staff, and there's this brilliant flash of light, and everybody gets thrown back.
He raises it, right? He raises Gungnir, and a blast of light shoots from
He raises it. Normally he's stomping it down.
Yeah, right.
And a flash of light, Laufey and some of the others are thrown back, and the Bifrost immediately comes and takes them away.
Yeah, luckily Laufey somehow manages to catch himself on a kind of a rock so he doesn't go flying off the cliff, because that definitely hit him hard.
And this is interesting because in the script, these are two very different things that happen at different times. Odin makes this kind of light attack, and then Thor says, Father, we should...
This is when that let's finish them together comes, right?
Right. Yeah, that's when the let's finish them together comes, in the script at least, and then he summons the Bifrost.
Yeah.
Here they happen, it seems like at the exact same time, and I thought that's a very interesting change. Is the idea here, you think, that is it the same thing happening of summoning the Bifrost also knocks back all your enemies? Or is he doing two things lickety split one after the other?
I think he's doing two things here. I think that because Heimdall obviously is in on this whole thing and is watching, so he's aware of what's happening. And I think that Odin had told Heimdall, be ready, I'm going to need you to just grab us as soon as you can. And then when Odin uses Gungnir to kind of blast that kind of shockwave to knock everybody back, that essentially, I don't know if it was planned that way, but that was the signal that Heimdall needed to say, okay, open the Bifrost and grab those 6 plus a horse, 7 plus a horse.
A horse that now has a cloaking device, apparently.
I think he does say 7 to beam up. I do think I think we're in a different universe.
And the Bifrost, I don't know if it's just because of the cold Jotun skies, But I love the look of the Bifrost on this particular planet. Like when Odin appeared, it was great. And here, when they all get sucked up by it, I mean, it's a beautiful Bifrost.
But definitely, because it was kind of like stopping and starting a lot. There is one moment where literally it's like, it goes very quickly, but the entire screen is just white.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which I loved. And then they do this wonderful, like, slow circle on Laufey's face. And what is going through his head at that moment, you think?
Well, I think what's going through his head is, I sure am fast. I can move so fast to get off the edge of the cliff and get standing back in front of my troops.
Yeah. That took me, I was using the minute and I was scrubbing back and forth. Like, when do we see him stand up and chill? Like, that was very fast. Also, that final look on his red eyes is, we're not done.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I mean, it seems like we've now triggered a pretty straightforward, whatever it takes, exact revenge plot. Like, there will be a comeuppance.
Yeah, this is war.
Especially because, he was already the one saying to Thor in our last few minutes, your father is not who you think he is. There's traitors in your house. Your father is a liar and a murderer. And now, he has said to Odin, let's have honorable combat. And Odin has said, sure, psych. And then thrown them back and disappeared. Yeah. And I can understand Laufey being like, okay, we're done, dude. Like, I'm just going to kill you. No more of this nonsense.
Right.
Well, and isn't it funny? This is a deep aside, but isn't it funny that we see, we get to see the backstory of Odin's journey, learning the same lesson he's trying to teach Thor here in Ragnarok. Yeah. Like, as the whole experience with Hela, like the fact that these two are deeply genetically linked is, I think, a real tribute to this part of the MCU.
Well, that's, I'm glad you brought that up as a point, because again, I find that moment when early in this film, and we talked about this, Matthew, but when Odin is standing over Laufey, who's laying on the ground with Gungnir ready to strike, and then he pauses and stops. Like, I feel like that is the moment where Odin has his turn and he finally realizes, this is getting me nowhere. I need to stop. Mm-hmm. I need to find peace instead of this war that I've been doing forever because of the times with Hela and everything. And I think that's, like, for me, that's the moment. I'm going to make that official canon in my world.
No, I think that part of Ragnarok really changes this and makes all of it make a lot more sense, because on the one hand, you sort of are Odin feels kind of hypocritical in that he's so... and that will also come up in the scene when Loki tries to destroy the Jotuns because he thinks that's what his father wants. And Odin's like, how could you ever think I would want that? Well, now we know it's because you did at one point.
Because you did that. That's your entire purpose.
Yep. But also, I think it helps to explain how angry Odin is in this minute. Because, when someone is kind of, even without them realizing it, pointing out your hypocrisy, when someone's doing something that is terrible, and partly it's terrible because you did it yourself, like, that's a complicated set of emotions, and it makes sense that Odin would, not a good thing, but like kind of take that out on Thor, as well as all of his actual disappointment.
Absolutely.
So then we cut back, and I kind of love the scene that we hear Thor and Odin arguing while we're hearing the machinery of the Bifrost. We're hearing and seeing the machinery of the Bifrost kind of wind down. It's got that, like, your blender as it's slowing down after you hit stop, kind of whirring noise. And to me, what it makes me think of is, like, the car has parked and the people are arguing as they're getting out of the car. It just shows this sense of urgency of, we're in the middle of travel, we're not even really done, and we're still just yelling at each other.
Yeah, I think that's great. And it does make me wonder, like, were they even yelling at each other while they were flying through the Bifrost?
Well, I think so. And haven't we learned since that you can do a lot of stuff in the Bifrost, right? Like, we had that whole chase in the Bifrost in Ragnarok again. Like, they've really leveled up the Bifrost over the years. I do think the machinery is very cool, although the CG in this one makes me think of that video game Myst, and just really excited about how far they've come in such a short time since this movie. Like, the compositing here and the reflections is it's good, and by comparison a little rough compared to how far we've come since. It's lovely. I think it's a curious choice on this argument, in particular the blocking of this of this entire sequence is funny. It's a hard room, and there are kind of a lot of people moving around, and we've got Odin yelling, get over here send him to the healing room, and they're all just a bunch of bodies moving around, and it took me several times to actually find Thor, who is the one talking. Mm. I find this such a curious case. I don't know if it's a Branagh deeply wanting this virtual set to be a stage and that the audience would be fixed, but the camera is legit moving, and Thor is very small in the frame, but he's the one doing a lot of the screaming.
I thought that was intentional, because what I got from it was Odin is kind of up higher than everyone else. He's totally in control. He's pulling out the sword. All the lightning's there. He's tossing the sword around. Again, poor Heimdall's hands. We'll get to that in a second. And Thor just looks so insignificant, And to me, I thought that was especially important because Odin, one of the things he says is, you can't even protect your friends. Get him to the healing room. Yeah. And this shows that Odin has now done in like 5 seconds the thing that Thor never did in the last couple minutes, which is acknowledge that one of his close friends is very badly hurt and needs help.
Right.
And so to me, that was kind of like Odin sees everything in a way that Thor doesn't. And that Thor is very kind of small and insignificant at this moment.
There's a frenetic energy here that for me works really well as I kind of see everything that's happening here. And so I end up just kind of like, I feel like this vibe works well, especially because of the way that you really see Odin clearing the room, let's just say. He's got a family squabble to do. Everybody else get the hell out and boots them. What I do think is funny is, well, we'll talk, I don't know if we'll get to this in the next minute, but I do think it's funny that when we do finally see after the Warriors 3 and Sif have left and Heimdall's kind of come behind them, later we'll actually see that Heimdall, he is outside, but he's actually facing inside, like he's watching them. And I think that's funny that Heimdall is actually like, he's just like, I'm out here. I'm just going to listen in, though.
What is he going to tell the ladies on Wisteria Lane later? He's got to have the goss.
So let's talk about Heimdall for a second, because Odin, in what feels like something, like he is so stately and regal. And he pulls the sword out and just kind of tosses it to Heimdall in a moment that just feels out of character for him. But mostly what I notice is Heimdall is not wearing gloves of any kind. And he catches this sword. Like, is it just that the sword isn't sharp?
By the blade. By the blade. Let's just say, not the handle.
Like, one hand on, and it doesn't look like he is like pinching it. I'm making hand gestures. This is terrible radio. But, it doesn't look like he's doing it in a way to like not touch the blade. He catches it with one hand on either side of the sharp, what should be the sharp edges of the blade. Does he just have very calloused hands because Odin has been doing this to him for millennia? Or is the sword not sharp and it is just a key? Like, what's happening here? I want to understand the sword toss moment.
Well, I think the sword is definitely sharp because we see him use it
later,
later, that it's okay. But I also think any person who is alive a millennia for a king to throw swords at him probably is going to be okay with the hands.
Okay, that's fair.
Like, there are other questionable things going on with his longevity than strong hands.
It makes me wonder about Heimdall's powers, because obviously we know he's got the power of vision. He can see across realms. Across these 9 realms, at least, to kind of see what's going on with people. But now also we know he has hands that are made like chainmail.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well,
kind of a creeper. It
does also add a whole other dynamic as well, that if we know that Odin is getting older and that maybe his body is going to start failing in some ways, like, it would seem very incumbent upon Heimdall to think that Odin's aim doesn't suffer as he gets older, because that situation could be a lot worse. But anyway, we will stop with Heimdall Handsgate and go back to the minute itself. Again, to me, what's so interesting is Thor is showing no remorse whatsoever. Not even when his father points out, like, you got your best friend almost killed. A couple of days ago, we talked about that moment where Thor defeats the beast. He's so proud of himself. He turns around, and it seems like finally it's dawned on him, I have gotten people into real trouble. And now the moment his father comes and rescues him, all that's gone. He's right back to his, like, Dad, we could have done it. Why didn't we do it together? It just, to me, it's again like showing that Thor has just no situational awareness, no understanding of just how much trouble he was in. and that he's just trying to hide all that by deflecting it all back onto his father.
Well, I think also he is fulfilling every stereotype of the ungrateful son on one hand, who is just trying to convince his dad that he has the power, he has what it takes to do what he thinks is right. And so he's going down the road of, you're old man. It's time for the youth to replace you because we're younger, smarter, faster, stronger.
Yeah.
And also fulfilling every one of the ungrateful daughter speeches in King Lear, right? Mm-hmm. This is yet another example of the Shakespeare connection to this property, and how much love clearly they have in retracing those dynamics between a father and child. And so Thor, I think at this point, I know he believes deep in his heart that he's saying the things that are going to get his point across. I'm not sure in that same breath he believes it's going to work at any point.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and it's such an interesting thing to think about, like, because obviously he really kind of had these exact same thoughts when he was arguing with his father in the vault after the frost giants had first tried to steal the casket and the destroyer destroyed them. He really has this exact same point. What's interesting is that then when he's convincing his friends, like, he's saying, we're just going there to talk. Like, that's kind of a selling point that he uses to say, this is why we're going to go. We just want to find out what happened. And it makes me think that maybe he thought that's what he was going to do, but I feel like in the back of his head, he really was always hoping that there would be a fight. Because
I think his friends probably knew exactly the same thing.
Probably,
like, of course, we're just going to talk. Yeah, we'll come. It feels very much like that sort of emotional sleight of hand. Like, who are you lying to, Dad or yourself?
Yeah.
Well,
to me, that scene very much had the energy of the party boy being like, "Let's go to the bar." No, dude, you always get drunk. No, I'll only have one drink. I promise. Like, that's the energy to me. It really felt like. And
I love what Odin has to say. Like, Odin is always speaking of wisdom, or with wisdom, as he's looking at Thor. Like, that's pride and vanity talking, not leadership. And and I think that he is so clear on these points, which I find really kind of interesting to see, especially knowing that he was one of these people like Thor, and has been since trying to teach Thor to, be a leader and have, as he says, a warrior's patience, which is obviously an important part of being a good leader. And Thor is just blind to it all. And as you said, Pete, it's like, Thor's the newer model, right? And he, you're done, old man. It's my time now. And it's that perspective shift.
Which is such a delightful. I mean, this is, again, it's where Marvel lives at its best, is presenting the extremes, and for us to be able to see such an extreme portrayal of the folly of youth, of the adolescent, finally having the will and the courage to stand up to their parent. And for the parent to realize, oh, this has to happen, and it's going to be very uncomfortable. Yeah. And I now realize my role in this is, I have to let them go. Yeah. This is that experience writ large, and I think it ends up being a lot of fun, both to watch and to think about.
Yeah, especially because to me, and we'll probably get more into this tomorrow. But to me, what's happening with Odin there is it's not just that he's like, I have to do this hard thing, but it's also like, how did my son turn out to be this? Yeah. What role did I play? Was I not more disciplined and like?
And is it it's a family argument, obviously, but to a certain extent, it really is specifically Odin and Thor. And I know for film purposes, it's great to have Loki in here kind of doing this tennis ball match as he watches the argument. But does it seem ever like Odin should also have had Loki leave? Because it's not like he's ever in this conversation saying, you two did all of this. It's very directed to Thor. He has everyone else leave, but it's like Loki almost, maybe he just very much represents that kind of like that slippery figure who Odin almost just doesn't even see at this moment.
Well, he does sort of, but at the end of toward the end of the film, we have Loki go through his same journey here. Mm-hmm. And then it is very much through Loki's experience of going through this that Thor is able to see his own, the errors of his own ways,
Right.
and maybe that leads to some of his awareness of what his father was trying to do, and so I think had he sent Loki out, it would have been you wouldn't have gotten that sort of trickle down emotional lessons learned in the film. So maybe that's a bit of a Doyleist interpretation.
And for me, I saw it very much as a very intentional thing, in that not that's intentional by Odin, but intentional by the filmmaker, because one thing I have learned, both as someone who's done a lot of counseling and like with families that have like troubling dynamics, and coming from a family that had some of my own, like there are times when two family members are so upset at each other that they will get in very bad fights and not notice that there's another family member in the room who probably shouldn't be hearing this. And like the cliche is often with, two parents yelling at each other in front of their child, but often like a parent and one child going at it while the other sibling is kind of there is something that really happens all the time and is incredibly hurtful. And to me, I feel like that's another moment where I really sympathized with Loki, but also understood him. Because to me, what that kind of tells me is both of them aren't really aware he's in the room in that moment. And that part of that is that he probably often was, Thor is the heir. Thor is the one Odin cares about. And rightly or wrongly, if I'm Loki in that moment, part of what I'm feeling is my dad cares so much about Thor that even when he's mad at him, I'm still not really on his radar screen.
Yes, and the fact that Loki's going through his own incredibly damaging awakening in this movie that nobody seems to care about until it's too late, right? Yeah. Until he finally stands up and says, "Shut up and look at me, because I've been betrayed."
And we then have what is, I think, of all the sort of like silent moments from Loki, I think this one is my favorite, where we get a shot of his face. And from what I understood he's doing, he kind of like, he takes a moment to like almost take a deep breath and kind of collect himself as he's watching. And part of what I'm seeing there is that he's having just so much emotion. Andy, you and I kind of go back and forth on to what extent he might feel bad about what's happening, or to what extent he's just like 100% rubbing his hands with glee that his plan's coming together. And I think it's probably some of both, but I think it's more the plan coming together. And you think it's more the sadness about what's happening to his brother. But either way, to me, this is Loki realizing I have to just shut up now. Like there's nothing, everything is going in a direction that could be very good for me. And just that breath to me is him just kind of doing exactly what Odin and Thor can't do, which is getting a hold on his emotions and wanting to see things play out before he puts his own cards on the table.
Yeah. And again, just to clarify, I don't think it's exactly sadness, but I think there's a sense of shock, perhaps, that it's gone to such an extreme place. Because I think, again, we can argue about what the whole intention was initially. Was it just to ruin the coronation? Was it actually to start a war? Was it to get Thor banished, or was it really just to get Thor, Thor's hand slapped and because he was caught in the cookie jar, and just to get Odin upset at him? And I don't think that he ever had in his mind that I'm going to put all these machinations into place that's going to lead to Thor getting banished. I just don't think that was the intention. And so I think when he sees kind of the extent of where this particular argument is going, he's like, wow, this is going a lot further than I ever expected.
Did not see that coming.
Yeah. No,
but
I
again,
think it's exactly right. And
but again, those wheels keep spinning though. And he's like, okay, I can use this though. And that's what I love about the character.
Yeah, it's just such a contrast to what he's doing compared to the other two.
Yeah.
And can I just say, from a production design standpoint, one of the things I love so much about this, when we start doing the one shots, the side shots of Thor and Odin back to back, the light in the chamber, there is something rotating something going on, because when you look at the ceiling behind each of them, the light is sort of dimming, randomly, and it feels so much like we're in Beowulf, right? Like we're in some sort of a firelit cavern, and it just feels so perfectly like chef's kiss classical to me, and I just adore that touch. It would have been so easy not to use the rest of the environment environment like that because it's already a great set.
I love that. I mean, this whole Himinbjorg set, the inside of Heimdall's observatory, I mean, it's immaculately put together. I mean, Bo Welch is such an amazing production designer and you know, crafted this whole thing to look as good as it does here. And then the way that the lighting is working here, that Zambarlokos' lighting, I mean, it is like this pulsing of the Bifrost energy that the observatory is kind of capturing here. And it's, this is one of my favorite locations in kind of the films because I just find this environment so captivating in so many different ways.
Well, and you can tell that it is a favorite location of the filmmakers. Oh, movie after movie, it just gets better. Yeah. It's just a cooler place to watch. Yeah. So
I'd say one of the reasons why I love it is that it does look it looks very like Asgardian and almost kind of sci-fi and everything kind of being like, you know, all the lights and stuff like that. But for me, I grew up in New York City. And so when I was a kid, Grand Central Station was still this like regal, ridiculously over the top train station. And it kind of got me into like, at one point when I was in grade school, I kind of looked into this more and found pictures of like Grand Central or like Union Station or some of the stations in London where like train stations were just some of the most elaborately designed buildings in the whole city. And in kind of like Victorian times. And this gives me a little bit of that feel too. You know, some of it just like the way the ceiling is put together and things like that, and the just beautiful things wherever you look. It kind of conveys that sense to me also, like that this is a world where kind of like, you know, those times where traveling was seen as such an important thing that is a building you're going to put an awful lot of care and attention to.
Yeah.
Oh, I love the way that all the circles on the wall, I mean, it feels like, you know, an actual observatory, like where we would build a telescope, right? To kind of observe the stars, like with all those circles and like just all over the walls with the little spots in the middle of them. It feels like you're looking at, you're in a planetarium and like this is the night sky in some scientific universe. You know, I find it just mesmerizing.
Beautiful. I
also wonder, you know, Odin seems awfully pissed because he clearly slammed Gungnir down into the stairs because it's just, it is embedded. It is firmly embedded in the second stair from the top. And I think that's kind of funny. that I don't know if there's a slot that he normally rests Gungnir in when he's doing this sort of thing, but I mean, Gungnir is firmly planted there.
And that's so funny. Now it ends with Thor really kind of like upping the ante in terms of what he's saying. You know, now he's no longer saying like, Father, you wrong in those moments, but he's just, you know, the 9 realms are laughing at us. The old ways are done. Which is interesting because we don't see any evidence of that at any point in this movie or pretty much any of the others, except maybe the fact that some frost giants were willing to do this, but Laufey clearly doesn't think that yet until he sees how weak Odin is. And we see nothing about the other realms. Is this Thor just kind of like grasping at straws for whatever he can be angry about? Or does this seem like, you know, maybe there's some truth to what he's saying? What did you get from that last attack he lashes out with?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think at this point he's just finding a lot of venom, right? I mean, that's where you go when you feel like every argument is lost and you don't have the gift of experience. You can kind of feel that this argument could have been had between Laufey and Odin just a few seconds before, had they not been 2 old men weary of these kinds of discussions. Yeah. And so, yeah, I think he's just finding that sort of childish venom.
Yeah. And that whole 9 realms laugh at us line, like, who knows? I mean, it's obviously not contextualized in the film at all. It just feels like something that, as Pete said, it's some venom that Thor is bringing up. But if you think about, like, you know, what's gone on through Thor's life. I mean, he's probably visited the realms, been drinking in various pubs around these realms, and maybe on Niflheim. So I was like, gosh, you know, Odin, I don't know. It's kind of weird how he's, you know, leading these things. And it's just like, I think that Thor probably has collected comments like that over time, and it's all coming out right now as it's built to this head.
Well, especially because you remember, like, he was about to become declared heir, you know, and this might be the sort of thing where, like, in his mind, he's already, like, put up new drapes, and he knows the new way that everything should look. But also it's that...
I would love to have seen that.
Yeah, like, you know, him redecorating the throne room. He's putting a keg, certainly, in a number
Maybe
of
that's why he flips the table. He's like, I was going to get rid of this damn thing.
But also, like, we just got back from Jotunheim, where one of the realms was absolutely laughing at Thor.
Yeah.
And so I also hear kind of a transference thing of like, no, it wasn't that they were laughing at me. It's because of you. They're laughing at us. But if I get rid of you, he just got humiliated on that planet in front of his friends and his brother and now his father. And so he's just doing everything he can to be like, no, it's got to be something else.
Oh, yeah. That silence that he gave to Thor. I mean, that was like, that was the moment, right? That's probably why Thor is so upset, because of the way that his dad said that to him.
Because it wasn't even like a loud yelling at him. It was just like a quiet, like, it was very much putting Thor in his place. Like, you are not able to sit at the grown-ups table yet. This is for the, the wise old men to discuss. Yeah. I can see him smarting from that. So,
yeah.
Well, I think that's about all I had for this moment. What about for either of you two? Any other last things?
That's what I got.
Great minute. Great minute. I can't wait to see what Odin's going to do with Gungnir.
Pete, thank you so much. It feels a little like bringing coals to Newcastle to ask you to tell this audience where they can find you. But, for those folks who are just following this one podcast and are like, this Pete guy sounds pretty cool, where can they hear more of you?
I am everywhere, all over TruStory.fm. Lots of podcasts there. Find us in Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. And I do a lot of stuff. So, come find us.
Awesome. Well, it's, again, been so much fun having you on. Andy's so great as always. To all of you listening, thank you all so much, and have a great day.
Until next time, true believers.
Marvel Movie Minute is a production of TruStory FM, engineering by Andy Nelson. This season's music is One Last Ride by Martin Puringer. Find the show at TruStory.fm, and if your podcast app allows ratings and reviews, consider doing that for this show.